Amnesia: A Machine for Pigs is a game which is as intriguing as it is unpolished. A period piece which rests on the precipice of the looming 20th century, it presents a scathing critique of the events set in motion by the preceding Industrial Revolution. Despite being marketed as a sequel, Machine for Pigs is more a total departure from the events of The Dark Descent, and features several notable changes to its overall gameplay formula, perhaps due to its development being almost completely handled by the Chinese room, as opposed to Frictional Games. But does this tale manage to reach the same unsettling heights of its predecessor, or does it fall victim to a sophomore slump? Find out in this review. Before you do, however, be sure to subscribe, hit the bell for notifications every time that I upload, leave a like, and comment any suggestions for how to improve my reviews. Let's get into it. A Machine for Pigs is told through the eyes of Oswald Mandus, a London man who has been plagued by fever dreams of some kinda evil machine following his return from an expedition to Mexico. Regaining consciousness in his bedroom on New Year's Eve, 1899, he hears the voices of his sons beckoning him to come and find them. With the assistance of some unexplainable phone calls and a trusty lantern, he decides to venture through this cavernous estate, the streets of London, and the horrors which he soon realizes await him beneath the city. This is a similar premise to that of The Dark Descent, though as you progress it becomes a far more sadistic one, unraveling an abstract notion of evil which is made all the more unsettling by the willful ignorance that we the players have always sorta had towards it. This is personified by the titular machine, a surprisingly sentient and powerful force which is controlled by some looming baddie in the shadows. It expounds upon thought-provoking subjects of exploitation of labor, as well as the ever-expanding scale of production and consumption that was central to the era of its setting and has arguably only become more of an issue in the 21st century. It's very hard to discuss this plot without giving away some of the more notable twists, but a game which provides food for thought is always a plus in my books. And speaking of books, a lot of the information the amnesiac Mandus needs to recover is relayed through notes and such scattered around the world. This system is similar to the one in The Dark Descent, though in my opinion the quality of the writing here is much more sophisticated. Where many of the notes in Dark Descent were more about pointing you in the right direction to just progress the story, these are more narrative, character, and motivation-centric. This is thanks to a semi-departure from the puzzle-solving elements which characterize Dark Descent. They're still here, but it's clear that the focus this time around is more on the story and creating an evocative atmosphere. This approach for me made Machine for Pigs feel kinda less bogged down than Dark Descent. The atmosphere that they did create here was laser-focused and oh so immersive. This is owed in no small part to the compositional mastery of Jessica Curry. This soundtrack has a more ominous and spacious feel than that of its predecessor. Where Dark Descent's compositions amplified the immediate terror you were facing, Curry's follow-up evokes not just this initial terror, but a sense of dread towards the ramifications of everything that takes place within the narrative. Beyond music, the rumbling and settling of the machine takes center stage in the soundscape, and this decision helps to personify the machine and makes the tunnels themselves feel alive as you navigate them. Every time it groans, the machine's presence looms just a little larger and scares the crap out of you at the same time. The world design also helps with this sense that the locations you explore are living. This starts with the first area being the house. Parts of this expansive property do feel homely, but others feel utterly dismal to explore. This is especially true once you begin exploring the winding crawl spaces hidden within its walls. The claustrophobic feel of these almost makes you feel like a pig to the slaughter, and there really isn't a more apt way they could have crafted these. There's also several small areas which have you venturing out into courtyards and streets, which I personally found to be a nice touch. Venturing into the factory though is where things really start to get going. The further you descend into these at times surreal spaces, the more tension builds. Granted, this theme was already done well by Dark Descent, but when coupled with a greater emphasis on descent into the horrors of one's own monstrosity, this raises the bar just that bit further. Also expounded upon are the enemies of this game, the Pigmen. These creatures are terrifying purely based on their design and behaviors, but the symbolism around them is still a little ham-fisted when it comes to parallels to real-world factory workers. Being given the opportunity to observe them from a distance going about recreational activities, however, is such a powerful way to create a sense of sort of like empathy for them. Even with this knowledge though, encounters remain appropriately stressful and tense, and the labyrinthian feel of the environments they patrol only heighten this. I also think something which helps to bring a Victorian era feel to this is the typeface, which evokes the handwritten literature of the time. This is on load screens at first, and along with the ink on faded paper illustrations, it creates a great aesthetic. Unfortunately, they decided to carry this great aesthetic over to the notes you pick up during gameplay, which makes them super hard to read without squinting. Like, just swallow your pride and use Calibri, guys, come on. Also, regarding these load screens, it has to be said that the Switch version I played at least featured some absurdly long ones. Like, it was getting to the point where my Gen Z ass was going on my phone to respond to messages and stuff. That's literally the antithesis of immersion, and it might sound silly or small, but it was a pretty big deal to me. And I haven't really discussed it thus far, but the rest of the gameplay is a bit all over the place as well. In a downgrade, you can no longer pick up stuff like chairs, bottles and such the way you could in Dark Descent. It's not like a deal breaker or anything, I just kinda miss it. A more fundamental change is the complete removal of the sanity mechanic. Though the sanity mechanic added a much needed strategic depth to Dark Descent, I actually think that having it here would have made the whole experience just feel too busy, I suppose. Personally, I'm glad it was removed because it lets the immersion and storytelling take center stage. As is tradition in Amnesia, you have a few glitching through the map moments, you know, here and there. They break believability, but fortunately they're pretty rare. It's also worth mentioning that despite the gritty, realism-focused Amnesia art style, the lighting and frame rate in this game can be fairly hit or miss. There's instances where lighting clearly doesn't work the way it should for the situation, and it can be pretty distracting, as can occasional instances of poor frame rate performance. It's not enough to shatter immersion, but it happened enough that it does merit discussion. Taken as a whole, Amnesia: A Machine for Pigs isn't an incredibly well-polished gameplay experience. Despite this, it manages to outshine its predecessor by giving players a great deal to ponder by expounding upon themes of labor exploitation, as well as the link between mass production and consumption, as well as giving a solid degree of character development and a satisfying conclusion. I'd give this game a 7.5 out of 10. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to subscribe, hit the bell for notifications every time that I upload, leave a like, and comment any suggestions for me to improve my videos. See you in the next one.